In the AI space, one of the big things that's come around recently is obviously generative AI, particularly things like ChatGPT as well, have been taking up a lot of the headlines. How then do you see the market advancing with this kind of explosion in popularity of generative AI?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, I think ChatGPT is a beautiful piece of technology. It's not in the same space that we are because we are really about the extraction of generating content, but it is, very, very interesting piece of technology. Of course, it comes also with a couple of problems, right? So, and I think at the heart, it's obviously a large language model, we call LLMs, right? So it's huge, huge, huge models. So how do we build them? It's actually not a scientific approach at the end, right? So because the core technology, the core science was developed by Google in 2017, right? So it's really just taking this core science and then applying it to a humongous amount of data, which is an engineering practice, right? It's really not about a science, it's about engineering and scaling up system and making it possible to, I don't know, exabytes of data to be trained, right? So it brings me, of course, to the first problem. So a very famous quote from Peter Norvig, who was back then at Google. I think he's still at Google, but back then he was at Google. He said, more data beats better models, but better data beats more data, right? And so what OpenAI did is they questioned that with a couple of $1 billion. Right? So they put a couple of $1 billion behind exactly questioning that quote. And they trained on a humongous amount of data, which obviously not everything in that data will be correct. So it turns out that in some cases, not having correct data, but noisy data, actually might even help you. Right? We call this the wisdom of the crowd. Right? So more data, even if it's noisy, it actually helps you. Predicting the weight of an ox is a classical example. If you just take a subgroup of it, you get to a bird's result. But if you ask more people, you get to a better result on average. Right? So predicting the next bird is exactly such a problem. That is why ChatGPT is so convincingly good in telling you something, right? So like it tells you like very, very convincingly, very, very interestingly the point, right? But at the same time, it struggles with the correctness of the data wherever the wisdom of the crowd doesn't work. So if I talk about, Higgs bosons or something that, you can't go out to the street and ask 1,000 people and build the average and then come up with something meaningful. Right? In those cases, it actually struggles with this, right? So, I mean, it's well documented. There are so many examples. I have in my blog some examples, but there are many, many more examples in the internet where very convincingly tells you something very wrong. And now pair this with the cognitive bias that we have, that more convincingly, more detailed the story is told, the higher is the probability that we believe it, right? So even I asked the question, I knew the answer. I think it was a question about the French National Guard's color of the uniform during the Napoleonic Wars. And and it very convincingly said something wrong. And even I was so convinced that I had to go back and double check my previously knowledge because it was so convincing what it said. So that's of course a problem that is very convincing, but at the same time not always correct. The next problem is that prompt engineering is still a thing. So you can still, it means the way you ask your question and it influences the answer a lot. Very easy example, which I literally did a couple of minutes ago to test if it's still correct or not. So if you ask now ChatGPT 4.0, it takes you, I don't know, 3 minutes to cook an egg. How long does it take you to cook 5 eggs? Previously, it would just multiply 3 by 5. Now it doesn't. It tells you actually, oh, you know what, you can make it in one pan, and then it will also take you only 3 minutes. Good. But if you ask the exact same question, and you just say like, 3 eggs take you, or 1 egg takes you, 3 minutes. How long does it take you? 4.5 eggs. It gives you a totally wrong answer, right? Multiplies 4.5 times 3. There's no recollection about, what it is actually doing. So with just a simple change in my input, I get a very, very different output. So like prompt engineering is still a thing. I think Sam Altman himself predicted that in a couple of years, 5 years, I think he said in an interview last year, so in 5 years it's going to be solved. But now it's still an issue. So that's another thing. And then, of course, these large language models also struggle a little bit with the hallucinations. I think New York Times brought this up when they talked about when a reporter was talking to ChatGPT through Bing basically, and then suddenly it goes from you should divorce your wife and I don't know all these things. We call this hallucinations, right? It goes into something and doesn't come back. And of course, what is still also a problem is these large language models are not only very, very expensive to build, through billions, but also the cost of prediction is high. So you literally need computing power to come up with the prediction. Right? And these are issues, of course, that will be addressed somehow. I mean, we personally at Cognaize address this for this industry with our 4 pillars, because what we are doing is first, we're building continuously learning systems, right? So GPT is not a system like that. So like literally we're building a system where the training data is generated as a byproduct to your extraction process that you're doing. And over time, the systems just get better automatically, right? And then we are about domain-specific foundation models. So we look at really financial data, which has the advantage that we can then outperform generalistic models because it is targeted to one thing and understands the nuances and details of that language and of that industry. And of course, hybrid intelligence, which we talked about already. And then lastly, we as a company believe that the IP of whatever models are created should lie with the client, not us. So our clients retain the IP of the things they're doing. This is how we are addressing, our AI. And I think all of these points are actually make a lot of sense for the financial industry. Having said that, I still think ChatGPT is a beautiful technology. I'm using it a lot actually to write emails, for example. Works perfectly fine.
Great. So, I mean, I guess just to finish off, then, what are you most excited about then in the space, and what's next for Cognaize?
In the space, I think, as I think with AI together, we can achieve new heights, right? And I think this is very important. It's very important for the finance industry, as I said, but it's also important for other sciences, right? If you take life sciences, for example, right? In life sciences, we have an effect which is called the E-room effect. So over time, things get more expensive to be produced, right? So it's not like Moore's effect, the other way around that we have in other industries, but really the opposite of it, right? And that's a problem because it means that producing new drugs costs too much money, it takes too long after a few iterations, right? Because expectations, regulation, and other issues, right? I think with the AI, we can address this very well. Just look at what, AlphaFold from Google did with, DeepMind, and I think it's called AlphaFold, which is predicting how proteins are folding, right? Which is a very important piece in drug recovery and in other things. And that is something that wasn't even solved before. So humans had, some ideas and some hunches, but we didn't know how to do that. And with AI together now we can do it. Now combine this with creativity of humans, you can literally produce drugs much faster, right? Now combine this even more with CRISPR Cas9, and then you will see where it can go. So I think we can just build a better world in a faster way with the help of AI, and I'm very excited about this. And I think it's not only exciting, I think it's actually important to have this capability because the world gets more complex and we need help to address all these problems, right? It's not, the answer to our current problems is not just one sentence, very easy, and we just go left or go right, right? It is a complicated world and we need to find solutions to complicated problems. And I think we need AI actually for those things. And that excites me.
Excellent. Yeah, no, exciting times ahead indeed. Well, thank you again so much for joining me, Vahe, today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you.